Welcome to Really American. I am Michael Hain. I am feeling fantastic after an even greater second night of the Democratic National Convention. Right here, I can honestly think of no greater depiction of love and greatness versus pathetic despair and hate. I mean, kudos to you, Michelle, for murdering Donald Trump's ego last night. That was fantastic. And as you can see, a sad, desperate orange man tries walking upstairs. I don't know, whatever happened to the golden escalator? Maybe that's now the property of Eugene Carroll. Getting down to brass tacks, we are well aware of Trump's vigorous denials of Project 2025, claims there's no connection, despite there being many a connection. Well, things got a little bit worse for him on that front after an interview was unearthed in which former DHS Secretary Ken Cuccinelli gave to the Daily Signal, in which he admitted that Project 2025 wouldn't.
Well, I suspect this project wouldn't exist if we didn't have the Trump administration, where you had a new maverick candidate who didn't have the machinery of the party necessarily like lining up and everybody from previous administrations helping out. And so you had this situation where it became clear that something like this is very necessary.
Well, that's quite true. I would say even more necessary in kind of the circumstances you describe, because even a we'll call it an establishment candidate where everybody just sort of wanders back in, but they're not particularly conservative. Then they're more open. They know what to do more. There's less chaos. But they're less likely to actually seek to implement conservative policies. So there's a trade-off there, and we're trying to overcome the downside of that trade-off.
So basically you're telling us, Ken, that all you needed was a hopelessly incompetent, malignant narcissist. If you just told him his hair looked good, you can rip away rights from millions of Americans and turn us into a Christo-fascist banana republic. Got it. In the same interview, Cuccinelli admitted Project 2025 called for cutting FEMA. Of course, the Federal Emergency Assistance Program that assists millions of Americans following natural disasters. I believe FEMA's budget will be cut, which means federal support for victims of floods, hurricanes, tornadoes, and wildfires will probably not get the help they need. Luckily, the Democrats have been pouncing upon the fascist evils of Project 2025 and exposing it at every moment in ads and everywhere else. In fact, it was so beautifully exposed at the Democratic National Convention when a Michigan State Senator brought up a giant book of Project 2025, which honestly, when I first saw this giant book, I just thought it was Trump's rap sheet.
On page 535, it says, quote, reissue Trump's Schedule F executive order to permit discharge of non-performing employees. Now that doesn't sound that scary, right? But here's what it actually means in plain English. If Donald Trump gets back into the White House, he's going to fire civil servants like intelligence officers, engineers, and even federal prosecutors if he decides that they don't serve his personal agenda. They're talking about replacing the entire federal government with an army of loyalists who answer only to Donald Trump.
I believe these are the loyalists that Mallory is referring to. Please do go on, though.
Conservatives have long believed in either ending law enforcement activities of independent agencies or ending their independent status. Again, that sounds pretty boring. But what it means is that under Project 2025, Donald Trump would be able to weaponize the Department of Justice to go after his political opponents. He could even turn the FBI into his own personal police force. That is not how it works in America. That's how it works in dictatorships. And that's exactly what Donald Trump and his MAGA minions have in mind. An expansion of presidential powers like no president has ever had or should ever have. Now, by the way, if you're asking if any of this is even legal, well, remember, thanks to Donald Trump's hand-picked Supreme Court, he's now completely immune from prosecution, even if he breaks the law. But that's not who we are.
And yet we somehow still have undecided voters. If anybody out there actually knows an undecided voter, can you just find them and shake them and say, what the hell is wrong with you? Speaking of voting rights, MSNBC's Velshi looked into a little bit about Project 2025 and what they want to do with voting rights.
If you'd prefer a DOJ that will defend and uphold voting rights, I got bad news for you on that front. Project 2025 would reorient the federal government's role from upholding voter rights to suppressing them. It takes specific aim at so-called mail-in ballot fraud and other types of voting registration that became targets of the big lie. Quote, with respect to the 2020 presidential elections, there were no DOJ investigations of the appropriateness or lawfulness of state election guidance. The Pennsylvania Secretary of State should have been and still should be investigated and prosecuted for potential violations, end quote. This paragraph is explicitly targeting specific officials whom Trump blames for his 2020 election loss. Again, what could go wrong?
Interesting, because a majority of Americans actually dislike Project 2025. According to this University of Massachusetts Amherst poll, the Democrats have been successful in spreading the word about Project 2025. Our polling finds a majority of Americans, 53%, have read, seen, or heard, quote, a lot, or, quote, some about Project 2025. This includes 2/3 of Democrats and key Democratic constituencies such as liberals, 74%, and Black Americans, 59%. More critically, nearly 2/5 of independents and half of moderate voters know about the blueprint. That's quite significant. Project 2025 has been like manna from heaven for Democrats, looking to label the more extreme, less popular elements of the rights agenda for a second Trump administration. Now you can sort of see why Trump has been dodging Project 2025 like it were the draft. Definitely has those bone spurs kicking in when the Michigan State Senator whipped out that giant Project 2025 book. Much like everything with Trump and within the Trump orbit, it always comes back to bite them in the ass in the end. And Democrats have been, as demonstrated in that poll, very successful at getting the word out and ensuring that Project 2025 trends across social media as it has and remains doing so until November when the election occurs. Anyway, I am Michael Haim. This is Really American. If you enjoy our content, smash that subscribe button and check me out on TikTok at Mike Haim Comedian. Talk to you later.